I noticed that the anxiety levels did drop considerably since the Chardonnay and the Merlot served. So, we're already on to one of the cues of how to treat it. So, I guess I want to say thank you very much for having me come back to speak here this evening. Sister asked me to speak in April, 2 weekends in April, and it hasn't worked out. They were at the beginning and the end of the month, and my wife and I were at weddings and couldn't make it on those days, and they changed the date to today to accommodate my schedule, and I feel that was very, very kind, and thank you very much for doing that. So it's great to have everybody here tonight. So we're going to talk about anxiety and a lot of things tonight, but anxiety is only a part of what we're going to deal with, because the treatment for anxiety, as I see it, involves something much deeper than what anxiety is actually. And as I've worked with people over the years in my practice, I've discovered that the stuff that we're going to be covering tonight actually seems to help the most people in curing what is really an ailment of thinking. The mind, I guess, run amok, if you will. So we're going to cover a lot of that anxiety stuff. You'll know a lot about it when we finish that. But the real treatment for that, as you'll see as we go forward, involves something a little deeper, and there's really a spiritual twist to this. So you'll see as this program unfolds. All right. And the other thing too is, if you have any questions throughout this, feel free to ask me at any point. I think it's really important to address questions as they come up in your mind, right? So if you have a question, I'm sure a lot of other people do. We can leave some time too at the end if you'd like to ask questions, but if something is triggered in your thinking and you want to talk about it, you have a question about something or want me to point something out, make something clear or whatever, just ask, okay? Does that make sense? Yes. All right, are we ready to roll?
Yes.
All right. So, I'm going to start first of all with a question. This is just a little kind of survey, a little interest of mine at the beginning of this to see kind of where we are here. All right, so the first question I have is, how many people believe that we have a higher power that transcends thought? Or in other words, something deeper than just our thinking mind? Wow. Great. So, yeah, well, this will be a lot easier than I thought that. This will be great. All right. This is terrific. I might just end after the first slide. So all right. So, that we are and have a higher power that transcends thoughts. In other words, something deeper than the thinking mind. So what do you think that is? All right. All right, so that's really great. That's good. All right, so this is a good beginning. This will be a lot easier to speak to an audience filled with people who have a spiritual root than those that don't. Yeah, well, that's important. Right?
Yes.
All right. So, as we begin, how many people were here last year for this? All right, so good. Okay, great. Nice to have you back. You heard a small little parable last year that I shared with you. And as we begin the topic this evening, I'm going to share this again because this is something that's really kind of an important thing to keep in mind as we speak tonight about anxiety and what it is, right, and how it's treated. So, there's an interesting story, actually, about the beggar in a box. And those of you who were here last year, bear with me. And those of you who haven't been here, this is going to be new to you. But the story is about this beggar who sat on a street corner for years on top of a box, and passers-by would come by and, they'd throw money in his cup. And one day, a passerby stopped by the beggar as he sat in the box, and the passerby said, "Well, what's in the box? What do you have inside there?" And the beggar said, I have no idea. I've been sitting on it for 30 years, but why don't you just give me the money, because I can't really be bothered with trying to find out what that's all about." He said, "Well, no, seriously, what's in the box? What are you sitting on?" And the beggar's getting more and more frustrated. I said, "I have no idea, but I just would like the money." And so the passerby persisted. He said, "Well, why don't we open it?" Right? So the beggar and the passerby got a crowbar and pried the top off the box and found millions and millions of dollars in treasures that he'd been sitting on for years. And this is I think, a beautiful place to start, and a great thing to keep in mind as we proceed with the talk. We're sitting on something that's incredibly beautiful, powerful, and very rich. And that's something that I want us all to kind of just think about as we move forward. So I'm going to use the slide that I finish with at the beginning. And I want to ask you if you can look at this picture of the sky without thinking. If you look at this, can you feel yourself as the clear space of awareness with no mind? When I was about 10 years old, I think that's when The Sound of Music came out. And the opening scene in The Sound of Music is a very powerful scene. Do you recall what it is? Remember? Maria's on top of the hill, well, on top of the mountains, actually. And the vista is incredible. And a helicopter comes in. When they're filming it, obviously, they didn't see the helicopter in the movie, but it comes in, and she's standing in the middle of this field in this unbelievable expanse. And then the music starts. It's overwhelming. Felt the deep presence, had no idea what that was. And then I noticed that as I kept, the years went by, I would have these instances where I'd experience some of these things, this deep sense of alertness and just presence, joy. And it would be fleeting. It would come and go. And I began to start, reading and studying a lot for the last, 12 years about mental health and spirituality, and I began to understand what that deep sense of presence and alertness and joy was. And that is the spaciousness, or if you want to call it, the presence of God underneath thought that transcends thought. And knowing ourselves as the deeper presence of that is probably one of the most transformational and miraculous things that can happen to anybody in their life. And as I work with people, pointing them to that truth seems to be one of the most significant things that contributes to people freeing themselves from the torment of their mind. So we start with the end. This is a quote from Eckhart Tolle. He said, "You are the sky, the clear space of awareness." And Eckhart Tolle would use the word awareness and presence and consciousness and God synonymously. They all mean the same thing. You are the sky, the clear space of awareness. And the clouds are what happens in life. What comes and goes. Nothing that comes lasts forever, because we live in a state of impermanence. Things are changing all the time. So sky is our true essence. The clouds are what comes and goes, things that happen. So we're going to learn about anxiety, but I'm hoping to serve kind of as a travel agent as well, and point you toward a journey without distance. And from the show of hands, you guys have already accessed this, and you already know about it. So my job as the travel agent is going to be very easy this evening. Okay, so let's just talk about anxiety first. Anxiety, negative emotions, serve a purpose. If we have them because they're there for a reason. Anger, anxiety, depression, all of these emotions serve the purpose of survival. Right? You know, if we're afraid of something, what do? We avoid it. We run from it. Right? Or, if you want to use the fight or flight model, we either run or we fight it. Right? So anxiety serves the purpose of protecting us from things that are dangerous. Anger is a negative emotion that propels us to take action if we need to against something that might be harmful. So it too is involved in survival. And even depression, that negative emotion, that negative state, is about survival, because what happens when we're depressed, we withdraw and we conserve energy. Right? Even in deep states of anxiety where people freeze and can't move, it's not unlike things that happen in the animal kingdom when suddenly a rabbit is confronted with a fox or whatever. Freezing. Right? So negative emotions are there because they serve a purpose. They protect us. Right? But survival is different than living. And yet, there is a vast number of people in the world who live in a state of negative emotion. Occasionally they come out of it, but there's an underlying state of negative emotion, surviving, not living, not in joy, not in peace, just surviving in this constant state of negativity. Yes?
I learned about this from Mark Dama. He speaks on positivity, and he was talking about when we're angry, we just we don't know how to act, and we just we act negatively.
Yeah.
He said it's something that we've been doing for many, many years since caveman times.
Right.
Because in caveman times we had to fight or flight, and it's just easier to be angry, and
Right.
it's easier to not have
Yeah.
that right sense of mind, just to
Yeah.
destroy everything.
Right.
That was how it was.
Yeah.
But nowadays, times have changed. We need to be more positive. We need to think more positively. But it's just so easy for us to just keep thinking negatively.
It's true.
So that's why we
Right.
have to fight it.
And after a while, as we'll see as we go through this, later on, if we live like this long enough, this becomes a deeply conditioned state of mental content, right? And people don't even notice it. People come in my office after years of living in a state of depression or anxiety, and this is their norm. This is the norm that they have. And normal doesn't mean good or healthy. That just means a statistical term for what's most common, right? This is their normal state. It's common for them. And as you see, that's a very dysfunctional state to live in, because things happen there that are incredibly unhealthy, not only for our emotional being, but also our physical being. So experiencing occasional anxiety is a normal part of life, occasional anxiety. When we're anxious, we've slipped into an anxious mind stream of thinking. And I like to use that term a lot with people when I see them, because what happens is, we get caught up in this thought process. We start worrying about something, right? For many people, worry is a constant state, right? A mental stream of thinking. And it's like a riptide, actually. You know, if you're out in the ocean and you are swimming and you suddenly are involved in a riptide, you get pulled along with it, pulled under, pulled by it, right? Well, the same thing happens with thinking. Mind streams, the continuous flow of non-stop thought. And if it's about a particular topic that we worry about, that stuff begins to get hardened into the physiology. Pathways are created. But when you begin to see the thought stream, the anxiety and the depression now has an opportunity to be seen for what it is and has a chance to begin to dissolve. Anxiety disorders, on the other hand, as opposed to occasional anxiety, are intense, persistent, and excessive states of worry, where one actually begins now to give up doing things and avoiding situations and people. It's become so embedded and so unconscious, meaning not seen, not watched, just, this is who I am, this is my mind. That's all it is, I just worry all the time, right? And they don't realize that this is an embedded thought form, a thought pattern. It's not who you are, it's just a thought stream. But it becomes so conditioned, and there are pathways created. If you ever want to look up the term neuroplasticity, I probably should have put that on there before I came over. But it's how the brain wires itself around how we think and behave. So if you begin to live your life in a constant state of negativity and anxiety and depression, there's pathways that are formed. So it begins to get more and more embedded. And then this becomes the filter through which people see life. Through a filter of anxiety and fear and depression. And that which we look at out there is distorted by that. What we're seeing is a pattern of our own thinking. So there's a lot of common symptoms of anxiety, a lot of fun ones here. Nervousness, restlessness, tension, rapid breathing, sense of impending risk and danger, insomnia, trembling, sweating, avoidance, worry. Have you ever had any of these?
All of the above.
It's true, right? Not pleasant. You know, people who have anxiety disorders, I mean, this is the state they're living in a lot. I mean, this is very uncomfortable. It drives people to get help, either from their, doctor, their primary care physician, right? I need relief from this. Or therapist, right? But the risk is, if we don't see it for what it is we end up treating symptoms rather than causes, right? We want to get to the root of what it is, right? To heal it. So all those symptoms we just looked at, the worry, the tension, the rapid breathing, the sweating, what's happening? Well, the body is manifesting thought. So if we go around worrying and angry and in despair and tense about things, the body is going to manifest what it sees, right? So eventually, we start thinking of things that make us feel afraid and worried and scared. We get caught up in this mind stream. We're being pulled into it, not aware of it, right? Muscle tension starts, but all these things begin to impinge on the central nervous system, and then eventually all the organs are involved in this, right? Because they're attached to the central nervous system. So the body becomes symptomatic. So we take Aleve, Pepsid, all kinds of medications to deal with the symptoms of what our mind has created. The body manifests that what we see. And there's a number of kinds of anxiety disorders. You have your general anxiety disorder, where people are just kind of walking around in a state of constant worry. General stuff, just constant fear. Uneasy, tension. And we have phobias. I put this up here because this is the top 10 phobias. I have a few of these. Arachnophobia, fear of spiders. My wife has that one. She doesn't run track, but when she sees a spider, she can win the Olympics. It's like the Roadrunner. Remember the flames and the dust and gone. Social phobia, public situations, social phobia. A lot of people struggle with that. And you know what it is? You know what the thing about this? I did a segment on mass appeal on this, and I was researching it for mass appeal. And I realized that one of the things that people worry about the most, like in social situations, is having to stand there with someone you have never met before, and then you have to come up with like small talk. Oh my God. I'll be right back. I have to just use the men's room. Right? And then the person watches you, and they notice you've been to the men's room about 87 times every time you walk up to someone. Right back. And because people are panicked about coming up with something to say with someone they don't know. Right? So what happens? The mind seizes us in that situation. We're immediately anxious, and it says to us, oh, this is not good. You're in big trouble. You're in the presence of someone here, and you have nothing to say. That's so bad. Tension, right? Phobia. Fear of flying, that's common. Fear of open places and public spaces. Enclosed space, claustrophobia is common. Some people can't get on elevators, right? Emetophobia, fear of vomiting. My kids had that when they were little. Am I going to throw up this year? It could happen. Really? When? You just have to wait. We'll deal with it when it happens. Fear of heights. I never had that one. Now I have that one. I don't know what happens. When I got older, I got a few of these. Right? I mean, when I was in, your 20s, 30s, even 40s, you're riding roller coasters. Now you look at one and say, okay, that's it. I'll be in the car. Cancer phobia. It's not uncommon. Fear of thunderstorms is huge. I had treated patients in the past where someone's husband, a woman actually, I was working with her, and her husband had made what would be the equivalent of a thunderstorm fallout shelter in the basement. Honest. So when there was, and of course, well, I'm going to talk about this in a minute. I'll deal with it then. But so when thunderstorms, thunders heard, the woman would go down into the soundproof shelter in the basement with no light, nothing, just sit in there, and then you don't hear anything. And that was how she got through it. Until, of course, we started working on stuff. And then finally, fear of death, which is huge. Right? Not good. All right. So, and then we talked about social stuff, separation anxiety, right? And trauma. And trauma's big. And the sources of anxiety that we have, there's medical, obviously. When people feel that there's medical situations and illness, people worry about that. Trauma is huge. I'm going to talk about that in just a moment briefly, about the physiology of trauma and how that works in our brains, right? And how embedded that becomes. Stress. Personalities. I mean, people who, for example, have heavy control dynamics and perfectionistic in their personalities, lots of anxiety, right? Because people who are perfectionistic do things really well. I mean, you want someone on your team that's a perfectionist, but perfectionists don't look for what's going great. What do they look for?
What's going on?
Oh. Right? They scan the room. Oh, God, there's that one thing. Tension, right? That never enough. And control. I mean, how can you control everything? You can't. Right? That's why the Serenity Prayer says, the wisdom to know the difference of what we can control and can't control, because they can drive you crazy. Physiological, 50% of our emotional set point is genetic. We inherit it, right? So we can have a predisposition to some physiology that makes us anxious. Drugs and alcohol for sure, because if we use enough drugs and drink enough alcohol, we change the physiology, right? If we drink enough alcohol and take enough drugs, then the serotonin and dopamine and norepinephrine production in the brain shuts down, and then we're in a constant state of worry, and we know just the thing for that. More drinking. And the cycle repeats itself. And then finally, the last one is having a mind identity, which is the other purpose of this talk, which is to make the mistake of thinking that we are our mind. The biggest mistake that people make, and the biggest thing that causes anxiety, is not to see that truth. We're not our mind. Something bigger and deeper that transcends that. And when we begin to become aware of that, there's a crack. A crack. And then people start beginning to get how they get better. So I want to talk just briefly about post-traumatic stress disorder. And then, by the way, post-traumatic stress disorder doesn't just happen when you're in, like, Afghanistan and you have an IUD go off under your vehicle, which causes post-traumatic stress disorder. I've seen a number of people who've come back from combat situations, right? In my office, car door might close in the parking lot outside my office, person dives under the desk, right? Someone who may have been emotionally or physically abused by someone in their life, right? Here's a loud voice, someone yelling, next thing you know, traumatized, right? So what happens in a post-traumatic episode, which is pretty severe anxiety? PTSD is really pretty severe, right? The brain makes a copy, a mental image, a memory, right, of the traumatic event. And it's put there on purpose so that if we encounter something similar to that, we've got a file on it, right? And we can react in the face of danger. The problem is that oftentimes, like the guy who was in my office, there was nothing really happening that was bad. So what was he reacting to? He's reacting to a memory. PTSD is memory activation, a thought form. But it does amazing things to people when it happens, right? And as it turns out, when someone has a PTSD episode, there's no longer the present moment. They're back to where this happened. They're not present. They're gone, right? Yes?
If somebody has an episode like that when they're very young, and when they're older, they don't realize what it is that's causing their anxiety. They're having a memory, but they don't know what it is. Is that right?
They may not know. That's true. Sometimes these things don't, they may not be aware of what's happened. Only in the presence of something, they feel this unbelievable fear. And that can be, I mean, you got to be careful with some of this stuff because, you don't want to end up with someone who then is creating false memories. Oh, this has to be because, your father or mother did X, Y, or Z. I mean, it's malpractice to suggest that without any evidence. But it's powerful. And it can, they might not know until they begin to start thinking about it. But an interesting thing happens if you look at a PET scan image, a positron emission tomograph image of the brain, when someone's having a PTSD episode, an acute anxiety episode from trauma, the prefrontal cortex of the brain, the thinking part of our brain, the reasoning center, all right, the thing that makes decisions and processes stuff, goes offline. So the prefrontal cortex turns deep purple, And then the limbic part of the brain, which is involved in fight or flight, activates and turns on. So we have someone now who is in a state of total fight or flight without any command center to think them through. So one of the most important things that we can do in the treatment of PTSD is help people see that what's happening is the activation of memory, right? I often tell people with post-traumatic stress disorder, the most important thing is to gain control and to calm down, because we want the prefrontal cortex back in the game. And one question that sometimes can help people get back in the game more quickly, if they can be asked this, or someone asks it of them, is there anything bad happening to you in the present moment? No. It's just memory, right? And it turns out that movement, walking, yoga, tai chi, energy psychology stuff like tapping pressure points and breathing while you're moving is probably one of the most effective treatments for PTSD. Right? So that's an interesting thing about how the mind works. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to do, right? But if it's not healed, right, if it's not worked and seeing it for what it is, this could be unbelievably debilitating. Yes?
People go for years without even recognizing post-traumatic stress syndrome, and all of a sudden, let's say 10 years later, something triggers them.
Yes. You know, there was a guy in here last year. He's not here. I don't know. He was either a Korean veteran or a World War II veteran. And we were talking about this stuff. And he came up to me at the end of the speech last year crying. He said, you know, I finally know what happened to me. Finally know what this is now. And that's what happened. You know, it might be someone speaking, or it could be a YouTube video or a lecture they heard on something, or an Oprah show, or, you know, whatever. And all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute. That's what happens to me. Right? And there's a lot of this out there. Right? A lot of this. Yes? Yeah, there are many, many similarities. You know, I would have to say that probably this, though, is more deeply embedded, you know, because it's trauma, you know, and a lot of things cause that. I don't want to tell more stories about trauma because, oh my God, this would be depressing. Yes?
You know, we went through a tornado.
I know.
And when they say on the TV, chance of tornado, yes, right away, it's like, oh.
Well, you know, isn't it amazing? Well, did you hear this? You know, about the tornado, and then and now because of what we went through here in this area, especially, you know, you hear tornado warning, and then it... Right, so, and if you have something called an iPhone, have you heard of these? And if you've done your due diligence and you've set up your phone so that you get bulletins from every news source, right? If there's going to be rain or a thunderstorm, your phone will not stop going off. Right? And then after the thunderstorm passes by, you had all those tweets and messages and things you did. Seek shelter, get inside, whatever you do, save yourself. Right? The phone's going off, constant reminder. And then after the front goes through, then the reports come in of the damage and the people that died and with the houses they got. I mean, it's unbelievable. So what happens with that? So now, like we had thunderstorms last week. Well, in Wilbraham, where the office is, it just kind of rained. There's some light thunder. Nothing's bad. But people canceled appointments. I said, you're 4 o'clock canceled. Oh, yeah, what happened? Are they sick? No, it's raining. Wow, I must have been either walking over or in the horse and buggy or something. As I recall, most cars have, tops. So anyway, but we'll talk more about iPhones. Oh my God. All right, so the treatment includes things like, counseling, medication. Medication is helpful. Medication doesn't treat the cause of it, but it helps a lot with symptoms. I mean, if it's really, really bad, that has its place. Modern neuroscience has given us some amazing things. I mean, usually antidepressants, because they're serotonin reuptake inhibitors, are actually prescribed more often than just anti-anxiety stuff. The anti-anxiety stuff is fast-acting. If you take like a Xanax or an Ativan or Razapam or whatever they're giving out these days for whatever, you take those things and within 10, 15 minutes, you're like, okay, all righty. Boy, I like this stuff. Right? The problem is that people like it too much, and then they start taking it a lot, and they get addicted to it. Right? And then the problem is it builds up, it starts wearing off, and people experience the withdrawal from that as anxiety. Oh, I gotta get another one of these things. And they're addicting themselves. So you gotta be careful with the anxiolytic medications, but the antidepressants are much safer for anxiety. They take longer to work, like 3 weeks, but once they get pumping and the serotonin's there, you start rowing your boat gently down the stream. Meditation and yoga, huge stuff for anxiety. It's unbelievable how effective that is. And stress reduction, which we'll talk a little bit about, right? And knowing who you are. Remember all the show of hands? Do you think there's a higher power that a lot of hands? That's what that means. That's what that means. So, ABCs of anxiety management. This is a really cool kind of little system here, right? So we have, in life, we have activating events, life situations, right? Something comes up. And then we have the consequence, the feeling of anxiety, and then we start, getting on the iPhone because we want to tell people about how bad things are. It's texting, you can't believe what I'm getting. Right? Because we want to, or maybe immediately put something on Facebook, right? Awful situation happening to me right now. I'm in a restaurant and I have to wait 20 minutes for a table. And then 47 comments come in. Oh my God, I can't believe you have to deal with that. Right? So what people think is that the activating event is causing us to feel anxious and behave with anxiety. But it's not that. It's what we tell ourselves about the activating event that causes the anxiety. All right? So A, the event, the life situation, that's a neutral thing. It has no meaning. They're life situations. They're clouds. They come and go. Things that happen. We give it meaning. And we love to give things content. Right? So we go into a restaurant, for example, we're having, yes, I'd like a table for 4. How long? 20 minutes? Take that thing, and walk over to whoever you're with. Can't believe this place. Can't believe there's people here. Do they have any idea who I am? So we immediately begin to add, so we have a life situation, a neutral thing. I'm just going to get a table, a neutral event, and instantly we start adding a story, a content to it. I can't believe it, this happens, this is the story of my life. And that's just a minor thing. How about when you have to, when you're leaving your office or leaving home in the morning to get to work and you go outside, tire's flat. That's a neutral event. But what do we tell ourselves about that when we start adding content to it? Well, some people actually get angry at the car, kick the car, right? I should have never had a car like this, right? Who made these tires, right? Maybe blaming the teenagers that live in the house for not doing something that they should have done that they didn't do, and that's the fault of this, right? So, what's that? Well, call my husband, right? That's a better deal. That's peaceful, actually. Right? But activating events, life situations don't cause anxiety. It's what we tell ourselves. It's the content that we add to it. The story we tell ourselves about it. The narrative. You know, we get up in the morning, we look outside and say, open the shades. As soon as we open the shades, it's like, oh. Rain? This is spring, it's May, it's supposed to be hot. And then you run into your spouse and people you live with, can you believe this? I mean, I can't. Storytelling. Right? And then when we start telling ourselves a negative story, as soon as we open the shades, we look out the window and it's raining, we're into the narrative already. Right? Just got up. Oh. And then what does it do? It begins to link us to all sorts of other negative things. Oh, we're out of Raisin Bran? Who's supposed to do? And then you start calling people downstairs. Wait a minute. Where's the Raisin Bran? Right? And now we're starting our day. Right? Filled with all kinds of joy and happiness and inner peace. Right? And then you get in the car in that state, you drive to work, and then there's construction. Right? Or you start beginning to pay attention to how many red lights. You start pulling up and say, I can't believe it. I've hit every light on Parker Street. Every single one. Storytelling. Right? And then you get to work. Right? And if you're not really happy with what you do, you say, oh, God, I hate this. How many more years before I get out of this again? Start looking at counting dates, checking your 401. Mental storytelling, right? And we don't even notice it. No idea. I mean, people don't really see it. They just live like this, right? Until you see it. So you see it. And then, when you see it, change takes place. So, it's what we tell ourselves about things. So, we are the watcher, not the thinker. We are the part of ourselves that can watch what we're thinking. That's amazing. So we're going around thinking this stuff, and we can stop for a moment and say, what am I telling myself about this? And watch what we're coming up with. Who is that?
You want to be that person?
Who is that? The watcher. That's the higher, deeper presence, consciousness. You create a gap and watch what you're telling yourself about the event, the situation, the person, or the problem. And then every gap, every space where you stop and you notice, what am I doing with this situation? I'm turning it into you start watching. And then there's a pause, there's a break, there's a gap. And in that gap of incessant mind stream thinking, there's light that gets in. Awareness. I'm doing this to myself. This is my story. Try this when you're at like CVS and you're trying to get home from work and you have to be somewhere like 5:30 and you go to CVS to pick up your prescription, there's 15 people in line. Right? Life event situation, and you start saying to yourself, how many questions does that person have on their medication? I mean, seriously, right? And so what happens? So here we are in the space of CVS, in torment, stressing out, heart rate's up, blood pressure's going crazy.
Needs more medications.
But
Need some extra medications with all the people.
yeah, but you didn't need the anxiety stuff when you got in line, but by the time you get to the counter, right? So but when we notice this, so you're standing in line, suddenly you catch yourself, wait a minute, what am I doing? I can turn this into space. No thought, just be. Just in line, with no thinking, just in enjoy of myself, enjoyment. Peaceful. Nothing has meaning except the meaning we give it. St. Paul, on the same topic of the ABCs of cognitive behavioral therapy of anxiety, St. Paul writes, everything is shown up by being exposed to the light. And whatever is exposed to the light itself becomes light. St. Paul didn't realize that that's one of the foundational pieces of cognitive behavioral therapy. So you can interpret light as seeing what you're telling yourself as the watcher, or the power of presence and consciousness that does that. And when you look at it through that filter, through the filter of consciousness and presence and awareness and space, or presence of God, what we look at changes. And if you change the way you look at things, then the things you look at change. Suddenly, the line at CVS is no longer an obstacle. It just is. It has no meaning. Where's the space for this? Where's the present moment? And Herbert Benson did some good things with anxiety treatment. You know, Herbert Benson have you heard of this guy? No. Herbert Benson is a cardiologist who taught at Harvard. I gotta hurry. I'm really tense now. I see I'm creating psychological time. It's always only now, but I'm already thinking I'm going to talk fast. He's a cardiologist that taught at Harvard, right? And he's a cardiologist teaching students at Harvard about how to be, cardiologists. And transcendental meditation people walked in and said to Dr. Benson, you should really study us because we don't have heart attacks. But Dr. Benson looked at the guys from the Transcendental Meditation Group and said, this is Harvard. This is back like in the 1960s. Thank you. And showed them the door. And then, being the great thinker and educator that he was, he said, wait a minute, that's interesting. They don't have heart attacks. So he wrote a book after a number of years of study called The Relaxation Response, about how stopping and breathing and thinking calms the body, and how the body begins to manifest calmness rather than stress. Right? Great book. Great guy. He's written a number of books. If you get a chance to read The Relaxation Response, it's quite interesting. So that's his little motto, stop, breathe. I added watch, because I don't like the word think. Because, stop breathing and start thinking about how bad this is. I can't believe this is happening. The mind stream story that just ignites automatically without seeing it. I like to say, stop, breathe, watch. And then choose from the space of presence. Accepting the form of the present moment is surrendering. Surrendering is aligning yourself with life in the here and now. So, things happen, right? You go outside, you have the flat tire. It's a life event situation, and it's already here. So what do we do with that? We surrender to it and accept that this is the form that now takes. It doesn't mean you don't do anything about it. It just means that you deal with it out of a surrendered place of accepting the form that now takes. Eckhart Tolle would call that leave life alone. It does its thing. But you know what we do as humans? Because we become so conditioned in our thinking, so mentally conditioned in our thinking, we go around saying, the universe, it's not cooperating with my mind. This is not the way it's supposed to be. This shouldn't be happening. And yet, it is happening. So the first step in aligning ourselves with our life is accepting the form that now takes. That accepting doesn't mean doing nothing. It just means, okay, it is as it is. And we deal with it from that space. Then there's an opportunity to transcend that, to rise above it, to not get pulled in by the life event, and then in the rip current, and then exhaust ourselves trying to stay with it. And by the way, breathing, that's a cool thing. The English word spirit comes from the Latin spiritus, meaning breath. Cool thing. Okay, so, moving right along, 5 more minutes. Thoughts become stories, and the stories become filters through which we see the world. Right? Thoughts become stories, stories become filters, and the filters are what we see the world through these stories. These stories that we tell ourselves. Right? We don't even know we're doing it. It's just unconscious. It's going around, telling ourselves all this negative stuff. Right? And this is what we're seeing life through. Right? So it's like a projector, And what we're seeing out there, in that situation is simply a reflection of our own inner state back to us. And we think, oh, God, that flat. So what's wrong? Oh, that flat tire. I'm so ticked off. Not the flat tire. Filters of negative mental stories of anxiety. So when you see the stories, you tell yourself about life situations, and you begin to separate yourself from the thought forms and become the watcher or the deeper present underlying thinking. Anybody ever read A Course in Miracles? Great book. I got a bunch of books. I'll put it up here when you're done. It's a slide up here if you want to take notes. But A Course in Miracles is actually written by a woman who was an atheist. Didn't believe in God. And one day she takes out a legal pad, starts writing, and then writes a book that's huge, the size of the Bible, called The Course in Miracles. She doesn't put her name on the book because she's not taking credit for writing it. She believes that she channeled the Holy Spirit in writing the book. 365 lessons in the Course in Miracles, one for each day. Lesson 1, day 1. Nothing in this room, in this space, out this window, means anything. And the whole purpose of the book is to get the mind out of the way, so you get to know who you really are. It's a beautiful book. It's worth reading. And if you don't want to read the whole big version, there's a little book called Accept This Gift by two guys. One guy's name is Walsh and the other guy's name is Bond. It's a small little paperback. It's like the highlights of A Course in Miracles. It's a great book. You know what this is? Right? Anxiety and mental clutter. This is one of the, there's now studies coming about how anxious everybody is having one of these. Right? People come into my office for counseling sessions, right? They sit on the couch, they're on one cushion, and the iPhone occupies the other cushion next to them. This is what happens. We go out to dinner, we put the iPhone right in front of us, right? If you leave your iPhone somewhere, it's equivalent of like leaving a child at the mall. Right? We have this attachment to this thing. And it's going off constantly. And if it goes off in the office while this person's paying to see, talk about their problems, but the iPhone, just a second, hang on. I'll call you back. Okay. Where was I? Gone. Right? And then 5, 6, 7 times. And there's no awareness of this. This is because this is the norm. Mental clutter. There's no space. Look at that. Where's the space? If we walked into this room, and this room were jammed full, really full, from top to bottom, every square inch with furniture, chairs, junk, right? We'd walk in and we'd say, oh my God, there's no room. There's no space. It's the same thing that happens with our mind. There's no space. There's no room. John 16:13. I've told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. How did Jesus overcome the world? With armies? How? By knowing who he was. Presence of God. Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world, but now my kingdom is from another place. There are many stories in Scripture of Jesus going out into the desert to find stillness and space. We hear him a lot. You go to Mass, you hear the Gospel, and Jesus is going through towns. He's accessing the presence of God, performing miracles, healing people, driving out demons, curing anxiety, depression, trauma, illness, and then after all of that. So, hey, has anybody seen Jesus? So they walk out in the desert and they find him out there in the middle of nowhere. Why? Because he's going back to the source of space and stillness and being. There's powerful pointers in these stories for us. If we see the deeper meaning to this.
You don't hear cell phones either.
You wouldn't hear in those days, right?
No, now you don't.
Now you don't hear cell phones?
Just sit and hear all the time doctors.
Oh, yeah, I know. What exactly. Right. Imagine that.
Right.
Yeah. What? Monsignor in my parish would be upset. I'd be back in a trauma episode. I'd be back in first grade when I did things wrong in church. But look at that. This is where he would go to this. Right? Nothing. Space. Sky. Vastness. And connect with it in a deep sense of presence. No thinking, just being. My kingdom is not of this world. The world is trouble. I have found a way to overcome the world. All right. I should wrap up. All right. Let me go back to the beginning. Quickly on this. Presence is not being caught in the past and thinking. When we're caught in the past and thinking, that's depression. When we start worrying about stuff in the future, that's anxiety, right? But it's not now. And it's always good to ask yourself in the state of that, is there anything bad happening to me right now? Right? The past is over. Course in Miracles. Trials, life situations, painful events are lessons that you failed to learn presented once again. So where you made a faulty choice before, you can now make a better one and thus escape all the pain that what you chose before has brought to you. That's the purpose of life situations. They're there for us to be able to use it to get present, to awaken, to know the truth about who we are. And it'll keep happening over and over again until we get it, right? Okay, so we look at the sky once again at the end. Can you experience yourself as the clear presence of space with no thought, just being? When you go to an ocean or you go out in nature, just go out there and don't think. Just experience the stillness and the vastness of that space. If you can see that and feel it, that's in you that sees it. Space and stillness sees space and stillness. The other quote from A Course in Miracles is, God is with you wherever you go. It's a great lesson. That presence is always there, underlying the mental mind stream of rip current that pulls us into stuff. And final quote from the Course in Miracles, you don't have to read the book, and this will be the last slide, I promise you. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists, and herein lies the peace of God. If you know what that means, you can skip reading A Course in Miracles. Okay, those are the books. I can put that back up there. I want to bring your attention to one more thing. I have a lot of free stuff on my website, drrobrobinson.com, so if you want to go there at some point in the future, there's all kinds of stuff, self-help materials, blogs, mass appeal segments, relaxation CD scripts, so it's all free. And if you don't mind, leave your email. I promise you're not going to get hounded. You won't be sold anything. But we're trying to build a platform for a book launch down the road. Okay, so the more people we can let know that, that's great. That is it. Thank you.